Hi, welcome to this week's AMA. Here is the question, or I should say questions for this week. We're focusing on rhetorical skills. These are questions that you would see on the SAT writing and language section or on the ACT English section. So these are questions that are more about the process of writing and the effectiveness, the purpose of something. So you have to pay a little bit more attention to what's in the passage. I'm just going to give you a chance to look at the questions first. So these are not from the same passage. And what's interesting about talking about having to focus on the content is that actually you don't need to read the rest of the passage in order to answer these questions. So let's first take a look at them individually. So the first question says to find which choice best supports the information that follows in the sentence. So when you look up here, it says having known Spalding for many years and having maintained a professional relationship with him. And then it says Geisel was an experienced writer and illustrator. So all of our choices are going to follow this having. But what we actually need is to find what best supports the information that follows. So you're actually looking for information that supports this idea that Geisel was an experienced writer and illustrator. So which of these choices best supports this idea? So we have to look at them, right? So the first choice A is talking about how having known Spalding for many years and having maintained a professional relationship with him. So does that have anything to do with Geisel being experienced? No, it does not. So A is out. Now, B says acquired a reputation for perfectionism. So that you're like, oh, he was a perfectionist. And it even says setting high standards. But does that necessarily mean that you are experienced just because you want to do something very well? It does not. And then choice C says, having been interested in politics before breaking into the genre of children's literature. Well, that has to do with his variety of life experience, but doesn't have anything to do with him being an experienced writer and illustrator. So far, none of these are looking very good. So we get to D, published 9 children's books and having received 3 nominations for the prestigious Caldecott Medal. So 9 children's books, that's definitely experienced. And do you see how the difference between 3 nominations for a medal, that would imply not just like A, that you want to do well and set high standards, but that you've done something and then that was perceived by someone else to be good, and that's why they were going to potentially give you this medal. But the idea is that just having high standards isn't enough to say that you are experienced, but publishing 9 books, you definitely are. So we want to make sure that we're always finding this. They're being specific in their question, so you need to be specific in your answer. So our best choice for experienced is choice D. Now let's go ahead and look at that other question from a different passage. So it says, the writer wants to transition from the previous paragraph that highlights the criticism of compulsory volunteering mentioned in the previous paragraph. So here we are at 13, and we're basically deciding on a transition phrase, right? So we have choice A, by its very definition, choice B, whatever the work may be, choice C, for many students, and choice D, fortunately for communities in need. Okay, so it continues with volunteer work is done willingly. So very rarely are they going to give you a choice that like legit doesn't make any sense, right? So fortunately for communities in need, volunteer work is done willingly. So it's sort of 2 side-by-side ideas, but they don't necessarily transition from one to the other. So just sort of keep that in mind. But our key again is in the question. So it said that highlights the criticism of compulsory volunteering. Okay, so, but the critics say that making volunteerism compulsory misses the point of the act. So this is one of those situations where they don't technically test your vocabulary, but reading is about understanding what words mean. So this is one of those moments where they've used the word compulsory. And I will tell you that if you're not 100% sure what that means, then you're really going to have to use some context clues. But what compulsory means is that someone's made you do something. And so this is important because it's distinguishing that volunteering is this notion of wanting to do something, right? And compulsory volunteerism means I'm making you help someone, which is potentially missing the point, right? So in this case, we, are stating something in our own words, we can better understand it. So we're trying to transition from this idea that volunteering should be something that you offer or want to do and not something that you're made to do. So this is the key thing that we're looking for. So I have just told you that volunteering is something that you should want to do, not be made to do. Then would you say, well, by its very definition, volunteer work is done willingly? Would you say, whatever the work may be, volunteer work is done willingly? For many students, volunteer work is done willingly. Fortunately for communities in need, volunteer work is done willingly. So do you see how for many students, and fortunately for communities in need, that doesn't have anything to do with this transitioning from I'm making you do it? Choice B is a little odd, whatever the work may be. Well, we know what the work may be. The work is volunteering, and the idea is that you're supposed to want to do it. So by its very definition, volunteer work is done willingly, right? So what's interesting about this is that once you know what you're looking for, the answer is very obvious. They just told you that volunteering is something that when you make someone do it, misses the point. And then literally to transition from that, it says, by its very definition, volunteering is something you should want to do. So this is the idea here. Let's look at the final answer is choice A. So for our 2 questions for this week, question 5, the correct answer is choice D. And for question 13, the correct answer is choice A. But the key here is that we're reading above and or below this underlined portion to find our answer. And we're looking for those keywords in the question, because then once you find that key idea in choice, or I should say question number 5, right? Best supporting the information that follows that he's experienced. Well, once we have that idea clear, our choice D was obvious. Similarly, in number 13, once we understood what compulsory meant and that we were disagreeing with this idea, then our answer became quite clear. All right, looking for those keywords. Happy practicing.